how could people communicate better?
This one, I believe, can be very simply expressed in that if there's to be any level of communication between people who consider themselves on opposite sides of an argument or a viewpoint or whatever it might be, we have to be able to establish relation with them. So that doesn't mean that you have to be friends or you have to, go out for drinks with someone or any of that type of thing, but you have to be able to acknowledge from many perspectives that they're just like you. That, for instance, let's say a good example, say you're an atheist and you want to have a conversation with a Christian, right? So the likelihood that you're fully responsible for your viewpoint of atheism is zero. You don't exist alone in the world. Once again, you can refer to my abundance mindset where I talk about the all my relations element, but we're all interrelated. We don't exist by ourselves. The ideas we have probably aren't ours originally. It's unlikely. And the same goes for the person that you consider has a viewpoint that you simply seem unable to fathom. So if you go back to like John Stuart Mill, when he talked about, and I know he's an old white guy or whatever, dead white guy, but what he talked about is that if you don't know your opponent's argument, if you consider them an opponent, then you don't know your own. It's highly unlikely that you do, because you probably, if you feel so perfectly convinced that you're correct, moral certitude, being certain that you are correct, is probably the single biggest cause of every war, genocide, murder, everything bad that happens in the world. There's a great poem by John Keats about it, after he witnessed World War I, where he said the best, I'd have to look up the specific quote for this, but essentially the gist of it is that the worst are the ones who were absolutely certain about their viewpoints, where the best had doubt. Because if you don't think for a moment that there could be anything of merit, now we don't have to accept, that doesn't mean you have to accept someone who's full of hatred, but can you sympathize? Can you empathize? Can you switch places with them enough? Can you go through a simple checklist that they're a human being? They have hopes, fears, emotions. They love people. They have friends, hopefully. All of those things before you interact with them. And in the online community, it's been shown very clearly that the fact that you can have anonymity leads to horrible behaviors that you wouldn't do, if you want to use a crude example, that you wouldn't do if you didn't want to get punched in the mouth in a bar or at a coffee shop. You wouldn't talk to people the way that you talk to them. If there was a chance you'd run into them. I mean, unfortunately, we see more and more examples in the real world that people do this, that people do relate in this fashion. But I think I've given some examples, but just to draw it back to it, that unless you can have some level of empathy, have some level of curiosity about the other individual and where they come from and how they came to view the world that way, there's almost no hope of communicating with a person who you believe is not the same existence as you.